This is the French Canadian Legacy podcast, and our guest right now is a guest we have had on the show before. Those who are regular listeners to the podcast know it's somebody I've referenced quite a bit in the podcast. I've said it before about him. I'll now say it to him. He is, in my opinion, the greatest Franco-American storyteller we have. And he's the author of the Franco-American Life and Culture in Manchester, New Hampshire book, Robert Perreault. Thank you for joining us. Couldn't do a story episode about Christmas without you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Now, obviously, you grew up in Manchester in the
Yep,
Franco-American family, and I know,
right.
I know you got some stories.
I do. I do. I will go back to when I was 4 years old. That's the first Christmas that I recall. And Uncle Gus, for Manchester people and New Hampshire people who remember
Sure.
Uncle Gus, well, before he was Uncle Gus, he was Santa Claus
Nice.
on Santa's workshop. So that's kind of how I got to know Santa Claus. And plus, my mother had brought me to Sears Roebuck to see the Santa Claus there.
Sure.
And so pretty much at 4 years old, I didn't make too much of a differentiation
Of course.
between the two. So that was cool. And on Christmas Day, we went to my uncle's. That was mon oncle Gérald Robert, who later became president of the ACA.
Very nice.
And of course, this was my mother's brother. And on that side of the family, my grandparents, uncles and aunts and all that, it was always in French. Everything was in French. There was
Sure.
nothing in English whatsoever, unlike my father's side of the family, which they all spoke French, but they tended to speak more English and all that.
Gotcha.
So here we are, Christmas Day. I'm 4 years old. And, the family's, we're at my uncle, mon oncle Gérald, ma tante Rachel. And at some point, the doorbell rings. And my tante Rachel goes to the door, and who comes in but Le Père Noël,
Of course.
Santa Claus.
Right.
And I'm looking at him, and it's like, it's funny because I don't remember that the other Santa Claus, which I thought was the same Santa Claus,
Right.
he was wearing a mask. He had like this, I don't know if it was plastic or rubber, or whatever it was, and the beard and the hair were all,
Sure.
like all part of the rubber or the plastic or whatever it was. Anyway, and then he started speaking French.
Oh, gotcha.
thought,
That was not the Sears Santa Claus, right?
That's not, no. And then to me, there's only one. You're 4 years old.
Sure.
There's only one Santa Claus, and he's speaking French. And I thought, oh, this is different. Anyway, so he distributes the gifts. He gives me all the gifts and all this stuff. And then at one point, I looked down at his boots, and I said, "Hey, you're wearing mon oncle Gérald's boots." And everybody
Sure.
starts laughing. And it's like, oh boy, they're thinking I'm catching on to this.
That's
like,
it.
what it is. But he left, and I'm 4 years old, kind of naive. And later on, they used to tell me this story about myself, and of course, I remembered it. They
Sure.
said, "Yeah, that was mon oncle Gérald, but you were still too young and innocent to to get it." So that was a story. That's one little story of the
I
first
like
Christmas
that. Sure.
I remember. And then let's fast forward a few years, and we had this old aunt. She was actually my grandmother's sister, younger sister, who she was a firecracker of an old lady. She would tell jokes, and she was always laughing and the whole thing. So one day, she's telling us this joke about a milkman who's really ugly. Okay, and the French
Okay.
word, remember, this is all in French now.
Sure. Yep.
The French word for ugly is laid. Okay, that's
Gotcha.
the standard French word, except that French Canadians and Franco-Americans in some regions, they pronounce it la. It's rather than lait, it's la.
Gotcha.
Okay, so he's a milkman. Well, milk is also lait, the
Lait.
same word, only in the ugly is spelled L-A-I-D, and the milk is spelled L-A-I-T, but the pronunciation is still lait, and the Canadians in some cases will pronounce it la as well.
Gotcha.
So when in the old days, when they used to deliver milk, the milkman would come, and like in the summer, you didn't want the milk to go sour, so
Sure.
you take it in right away, and in the winter, you didn't want it to freeze, so because they put it outside or on the porch or whatever. They'd have
Sure.
these special boxes or whatever. So they deliver the milk that way, And my aunt says, well, this milkman, he'd hear people go, vla, vla, la, you know, and the people, what they're saying is, you know, here's the milk,
Here's the
you know,
bill, right?
take it in, you know, and he's thinking, because he knows he's ugly. So, blah, blah, and he's all upset because everybody makes fun of him, right?
Yeah,
Which isn't
sure.
even the truth anyway. So there's that joke, okay?
Sure. Yep.
Now, that same year, at around Christmas time, I was a Cub Scout. And so we had a Cub Scout Christmas party, and they gave out little gifts to everybody. And I got a few of these little finger puppets, okay?
All right, sure.
And one of the little finger puppets was this little man. And when my great aunt saw him, she looks at him and she says, "Vla la."
That's an ugly
Look at this
puppet, sure.
ugly, ugly puppet, you know? So that became a joke in the family, "Vla la." And we called him, like his name, we called him "Vla la."
Gotcha.
All right. So my mother gets this bright idea. So here we are, Christmas, and everybody's opening their gifts and stuff. And, you know, somebody gave her what she thought was this little box, you know, with jewelry in it. She opens it up. She goes, "Vla la." There it was, wrapped in cotton, you know, real nice and all this stuff. So everybody got
Sure.
a joke out of this, right? So then what happens is, fast forward to the next Christmas, and somebody else got vla la.
Of course.
Excited, hey, let's do this again. We got a good laugh. So here was vla la. And so it just kept going and going and going until my wife and I got married. And in our, you know, younger years of being married, some of the old grandparents had died and all
Sure.
that, and they were part of that whole deal. And so what was left basically was my parents, and they were old, and my
Sure.
my uncle, mon oncle Gérald. So, you know, we kept doing it there. And I remember my father, I said my father's side of the family, they all spoke French, but they knew how to speak French, but they tended to be more English and all,
Sure.
you know, speaking
Yep.
English and all that. So we gave it to my father. He didn't know what to do with it. He was like, you know,
He was
to
not
him, it was
impressed
like,
with this.
you know, this joke, blah, blah, never would have worked with his side of the family, and he proved it right there and all that kind of stuff. So eventually, mon oncle Gérald died, and my parents died, and all this, and so my wife and I just kind of kept it. And I mean, our son knew about it and stuff, but you know, it's not the same with the little kids. And now he's a father, and he's married, and he's got grandchildren, so they know about it. And so, you know, we still keep him, but you know, he has like this little house, you know, that my mother
Okay.
made him, you know.
All right. Yeah.
And you know, you
Well,
can put
of
him
course.
in, and you can hang him up, you know, in the tree if you want,
Well,
like this.
why wouldn't
But
you? Right. Yeah.
what?
So why wouldn't you? Of
But
course. Yeah.
of course. And what I wanted to say was, vla la.
That is an ugly finger puppet.
All right. Yeah, look at that. Huh?
That
Like that. And just think, I got him in 1960. He's 60 years old.
and he's
you
still
know?
hanging around. He's
And
still
he's
getting
still
laughs.
hanging around. So now what you can do is, you know, you put him in here, and
Oh.
there he is. So he can go in the tree. But
That's terrific.
what my wife did one year was she put him in the creche with the baby Jesus
Of course.
and Mary and Joseph and all that. And he was one of the guys.
That is awesome. That is a way fun story. Very,
Yeah.
very cool.
So these are our Christmas traditions in our family. So,
Thank you very much, Robert. This has been awesome. Again, Robert Perreault, Franco-American Life and Culture, Manchester, New Hampshire. Vive la différence. Thank you so much for joining us. This was great.
all right, terrific.